Caroline Marshall is a force to be reckoned with. After building a successful career as a virtual assistant, she launched Upsource in 2020, while in lockdown, pregnant and acting as the primary caregiver for her toddler. Through maternity leave, having a sick baby, and dealing with PTSD, Caroline found the resilience to grow her fledgling business to 30 virtual assistants, all while working a 4-day week so she could spend a day with her kids. This is Caroline's unfiltered story of what it takes to build an award-winning business that still offers flexibility and work-life balance. Welcome, Caroline. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Kate. Pleasure to be here. And wow, what an introduction.
So we were in the midst of a global pandemic. You were pregnant. What made you start Upsource from your kitchen table in April 2020?
Oh my goodness, I think many reasons. The short version, if we go back to the start, is I had experienced redundancy when before my first child was born. And it'd been hard going, and I felt a little bit lost after that. I went to go work at a friend's family business. It was a great place, but obviously during COVID, it was very in person, and it wasn't what I was used to. I'd kind of got used to, I'd been working at a virtual assistant agency before, so that was my background. I'd got used to pre-COVID, actually, the virtual life, a certain amount of flexibility, doing work when it worked for me, not just, when it needs to be done and things. So I guess redundancy was where it all started, and not fitting into employment world anymore. That's how it felt, especially and then when I tried it the second time round, I think in person wasn't right either. And then when the world went into lockdown, it was a while till I knew if I was going to be furloughed or not. So I felt, oh right, here again, main carer, no job, which is very important to me, and I think it's very important for women to continue their careers if that's what they want to do and if that's what they're passionate about. So I thought, well, I can either look for another job while I'm pregnant and start, making sure I can pay the nursery fees if hopefully the world does open up, or I can try it on my own.
And actually, figures show that there was a real surge in female entrepreneurship during the pandemic. I'd love to hear your take on what the advantages and disadvantages were of starting a business during that time.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think it's hard because I think there was some personal advantages. So my husband did work from home. That was great. So while we were reliant on his income and his job, and he had a busy job, I communicated what I wanted to do. So every day we did allow me, it was like the time to have a bath because I was pregnant and tired, or time to start working on my business. I can't lie. I did anything from nothing to maybe 2 hours per day for about 3 months. It was really... once I got out the sickness stage, I did creep up more. So that was an advantage for myself. I do think maybe the virtual networking was a real advantage. I don't know how I would have felt about going into town and networking during those first few months. And I managed to do quite a bit online and meet some people, especially in the VA world. So that was a real advantage to that as well. And I think people started to open up a bit more. Everyone was at home, whether you were employed or running a business. A lot of people were at home with kids, and so there was that real appreciation at the time of the importance of childcare, what people were juggling. So when you were starting a business and needed to juggle it around childcare and things, people got it during lockdown. I think that was a real advantage.
And how did you fund the business in those early days to get it off the ground?
It was very bootstrapped. So fortunately, the virtual assistant world is something you can start on very little money. I invested, it would be less than £1,000 on a website. I also asked around, so I got recommendations. A friend of a friend did our branding. A friend of a friend did the website. I invested obviously some money in the things you need to, which is insurance, ICO registration, the important things. And also some networking groups, which were quite low cost at the time as well. So actually very little money, and it was more time and also into my plans and things where the investment came.
And then I know that 6 months into launching the business, you went on maternity leave and had to hand over all your clients. How hard was it to step back from that business that you'd built, and what processes did you put in place to make sure that the business could run smoothly without you at the helm?
Yeah, that's such a big question. I think actually I was looking back on it, fortunate that it was in the plan to take maternity leave, and it meant I could plan from the start. And I was very fortunate. I had, I think, two clients I had to tell that I was going on maternity leave, but otherwise I opened up that conversation from the start, thanks to some encouragement from my VA mentor and the membership they're in. They're like, just tell them from the start. And the clients were like, really great about me doing that. They came on board. So I hope that gives some confidence to anyone who is worried about telling clients or taking on new clients about going on maternity leave. I'm very encouraging of starting it and then handing it over. So that's what I did. And something that was really important for my business was having a lead. I had a lead VA with someone I'd worked with before. So we'd already had that relationship. She was taking on one of my clients, one of my bigger clients, but also was there for the team. It was a small team of 5 I handed over to. But she was there for any questions, if the clients needed anything. Most, they knew I was on maternity leave, so there was also that respect there. As, for a few months I wasn't around, especially as the clients were communicated to that our baby was in hospital for a while after. So it was fairly smooth running on that side, but it was stressful. I even now, because my job is to match clients and their perfect VA, that's a lot easier than my clients and handing them over to a VA. There was a lot of work that went into that, especially with one, because they were going through such a business overhaul. So I'd done all of that with them and then needed to hand it over. And so I think a process, the right software, and the right people. And that was 3 things that were definitely needed to take the leap of maternity leave.
It's really interesting that because you were pregnant, you built a business that could run without you. Do you think it would have looked quite different had you not been pregnant? Do you think you put certain processes in place right from the start because of that?
Yes, definitely. Agree. I think I would have stayed because I removed myself from the doing of VA work. I decided to give that a try once returning from maternity leave. I think I would have stayed doing the doing a lot longer, especially maybe keeping one large client who I really enjoyed working with, or even a couple of smaller ones. And yeah, agree. I think a process. I'm quite a stickler for process, so I think I probably would have put them in, but not quite as quickly as that. And there was even something I remember. My plan was to probably step away, or with the intention that things don't always go to plan, about a month before my due date. So I was around for a while and had some wiggle room. But between my second and third trimester, I got really tired, really fatigued. I've been working very hard. So I moved that forward, and then it worked out to be about a month. So
and then when you did return to the business, you had quite a sick baby, and I know you suffered from PTSD. Can you just talk us through that experience and how you coped with that personally and as an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. I think first and foremost was that backup plan. And no one ever wants to talk about worst case scenario, but we really did have the worst case scenario. And so we had someone, my husband, just contacted to be like, things aren't okay. And that was it. Nothing needed from me. I could step away from the business, and that was great. And then actually having the business was fantastic for me, not in terms of recovery, but an escapism from that trauma and things. It was very separate, my business, from what we went through with my child and coming back home during lockdown. So I think that was the great thing about having a business, was that I had something there, but it wasn't all in. It's not like returning to a job where you have to agree certain hours and it's kind of all or nothing. It was there when I needed it. And at times that was a great thing to have. The VA world is a lovely world with a lot of women who's gone through maternity and things. So it was a pleasure to have the business afterwards, even though there was obviously stuff I was suffering with personally.
It sounds like it, in many ways, having that business was part of the healing process because it gave you that part of your identity back and you had that really safe, supportive network around you.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think that's an excellent point. It was probably part of my identity of like, no matter what, there's this to keep me going in a different way when I'm feeling concerned about all these other things that went on because of our child being in NICU. So yeah.
So now you work 4 days a week, but earn more than you did when you were a full-time PA or VA. How do you maintain that balance, and how easy is it to switch off on that 5th day?
It's a constant managing of that. I've learned, I think, and this is one thing probably a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners can identify with. My personality doesn't switch off very well. So that's why I feel I might as well own a business and earn money and do something I'm passionate about by not switching off very well than pouring that into a company that may at some point not be the right fit for me. So that's kind of the first thing as well, is I've made peace with my personality type. But Wednesdays, yes, it's a constant thing that I readdress all the time, as well as also I do the school run. So that does mean an earlier day most of the time, a lot of the other days. But I do have my own personal assistant, and they run my inbox on Wednesdays completely to try, and that's still a work in process. We've only just started that. And being someone who has done a lot of this myself, I know that takes time. I have a community manager who helps me with the team. So anything on that side, everyone knows who the main contact is, especially on a Wednesday. And Wednesday, I'm very strict on mummy days. It doesn't always work out. Occasionally I'll have the odd meeting. I tend to leave that though, if it tends to be another mum who knows what I'm doing and manage expectation and what's going on my side. But I think it's something I constantly have to readdress and make sure I'm doing the right thing and make sure it works out and don't try and overstretch myself. But also remember, when I am working late in the evenings, that's why, and that I wouldn't change that. I really enjoy that flexibility right now. And having that day with my child and knowing it's there.
And so you're nearly 3 years into the business now. When you look back, what were some of those big early challenges, and what do you now wish you'd done differently?
Oh my goodness, that's such a good question. I can't believe it's almost been 3 years. I think like with any business, who is the right perfect Upsource client who we want to work with. That's still a process we've been going through, and I've definitely seen a change in that, especially as we became a limited company and VAT registered. So that does change your client base naturally, and I've realised that as well. What sort of team I want to work with, who works well with Upsource, who works well with me and the clients. I really do like a huge mix of characters on the team, so that means a different mix of clients as well. Early days things. It was mainly like small things, like my website was on a host that wasn't right fit, so I changed it over to WordPress last year. It was kind of smaller things, and I'm always, like any entrepreneur or business owner, just sorting out processes and making sure they're all right, what they meet the business needs that we have right now. I'm a firm believer in a process and the right software, so I'm always reevaluating that.
To pick up on your point around working out who the right clients are for you, what does your perfect client look like, and how did your reputation change when you became a limited company? Did it give you more gravitas and credibility?
Yes, it was interesting. I think it did. It did for me. It meant, right, okay, this is a business. We did it because we reached a certain level of income. That was really helpful, and it also, I did then start to attract clients that were VAT registered as well. So it's kind of how things worked out. And it also meant they were on larger hours, which suits us and the business and my time and the team's time better. Is, one's around on 30, 40-hour packages. Our core service is still personal assistant services, inbox, diary management. So a lot of our perfect clients tend to be CEOs of whether it's startups, scale-ups, SMEs, agencies, and also some corporate coaches, because they don't have a team and they really rely on the freelancers around them. So they're a great client to have as well. And so I did notice a shift after we became VAT registered. There was a few clients still coming in who I in a different life I'd really like to work with in a different way, but just weren't suitable and didn't have the income that could afford Upsource at that time for us. So it was a good shift at that time. It was a nice thing to go through next year. We went through quite a lot of growth, and I think now this year it's just going to be a bit more meaningful and a bit more well planned, our growth.
So you work with a lot of entrepreneurs and SMEs. What's your advice to them on what tasks they should be outsourcing?
Well, there's a really, really simple thing you can do, which is note down your regular tasks. So that's your daily, your monthly, weekly, even ones that are ad hoc and annual, like things that end up falling on CEOs, like registering your insurance and ICO, which I talked about earlier. Make a list of those, or keep those in mind, or do a brainstorm with someone like a virtual assistant agency owner or a virtual assistant, and get those tasks off your plate, because those are the ones you can easily take off your plate. And I would start to get used to delegating. Start you can't grow doing it all yourself. That's the fact. And you need to be able to let go of things. So starting with things like that would work really well. Also think of things that you don't like doing, shouldn't be doing, hate doing. Those are excellent tasks to hand over. So, for example, I am not a writer. I'm not good at that. So I've always had someone doing writing, copywriting for me. And yes, and it actually gets done as well. I've realised I had on for a year start a blog, and now I have someone doing it for me twice a month. Things like that, and and have someone external look at your inbox and diary, because sometimes when you're so in it every day, you feel how would I hand this over? Where would I begin? And the truth is, it takes time, but you either invest it now or invest it later, kind of thing. So. Those would be some of my quick recommendations for figuring out how you can get help.
And in terms of delegation and managing your own tasks, are you quite disciplined with that? How do you manage your diary each day? What do you focus on?
Yes, so it's a constant process. I did say my VA, she looked at me like a true VA when I said, right, on Thursdays I need to do this, and so that means I can't do Thursday calls. And she was like, at all? The look of fear on her face. Well, bless her. It is something I try and plan well, because I think I've definitely gone through periods where I'm just on calls back to back each day, and that doesn't serve me or the business well. So trying to see how I can step away from that, and that's whether looking at the roles internally as well as just my calendar. There's things I know I need to do every day, which we've talked about briefly about PTSD and recovery, is I need to meditate every day. I need to move in some form every day, because health is a priority now, no matter what. So there's things like that I need to prioritize in my day. Obviously, I'm not perfect. Things crop up that are urgent with clients or VAs, and I'm there for them. That's my job. But, as long as I go into the week trying this, and I'm quite disciplined with my 3 goals for the week. What the 3 things I really want to achieve. And when I'm not disciplined on that, it's normally a sign that I need to readdress things again.
It's a great point. And the team that you have around you are obviously so important. What are your tips and lessons on recruiting the right team?
I'm constantly learning with that. Recruitment, it's not always going to work out sometimes. I think my friend told me this was really interesting when I first started. If it's like 4 in 5 hires work out or something. So if one doesn't work out in every 5, she worked in HR. I was like, oh, that's a really nice rule to know, because I think sometimes, especially in the VA world, we can take it quite hard on ourselves if something doesn't work out. But it's not always going to work out. As a people business, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of things on people businesses outside the VA world to know how the challenges that come with that. But my top tip is always about the community. I'm really invested in the virtual assistant world, and always think about how I can be more invested in the virtual assistant world, and that's how you can find the best people, ultimately, is being ingrained in that community. And word of mouth, so referrals to VAs mean just as much as referrals to clients. I said this to someone the other day, I chat to potential VAs more than I do potential clients. So I actually do invest more time in that, because we're only as good as the people we have on the team.
And how do you manage a team of virtual freelancers? How tricky is that to keep tabs on everyone and lead a team?
I have the right people in place, so it's not just me on that side. I have someone who helps me on the community, someone who manages the operations side of things, as well as, like, saying, my own VA as well. So the pressure isn't all on me. And also with freelancers, it's not managing them. It's not in the same way that you would an employee. So there is a certain level of autonomy and trust that has to come from that. but I'm also a stickler for a process. And and so there are processes in place just to make things easier and ensure. And my key thing is communication. I can't help someone if I don't know about it. So if someone comes to me with their problem or whatever they need to talk about or something they'd like to work on with a client or comes to my team about it, then that's how we can work together the best way. And I try to give the same back. I try to be quite open in return as well.
Talking of communication, I know that you have a background as a performer. So I'm wondering how that has shaped and impacted you as an entrepreneur.
Oh, hugely. And I think that there's a lot of credit to the background of singing and dancing. And I don't think I'd be here on this podcast with you if I didn't have a performer background. There is nothing more terrifying than singing to a room full of people. I think I was actually quite good at interviews and things because I was like, well, it's not as scary as this. There's something very vulnerable, especially with singing, because it's your voice. And putting that out there. And so actually, while I had all the fears that come with putting out Upsource out there, especially when I felt like I'd failed with redundancy before, things like that. And putting yourself out there with a business, I think when you've done that as a singer, I think actually you're kind of used to doing the thing that's scary. And if you fail, it's okay.
Do you think you come from a family of entrepreneurs as well? Do you think that made you less fearful of starting your own business?
Yeah, definitely having people I'd seen in my family run their own businesses. Yeah, I think definitely. My dad's is an accountant, so as long as the finances look good, I know I'm on track.
Does he check your finances?
Yes. Oh, yeah. He's my accountant, and that's it. And the first time I showed him my spreadsheet of as well, this is what I want to do. He was like, yeah, okay. And then I showed him. We sat down. I was like, I just want you to look at where we are. And he was like, oh, you've got a business here. And I was like, yeah, thanks. So that was nice. But also I do have, like, especially my husband's friends, a lot of them have their own businesses. And it is nice to chat with that community and know that, I've never felt one of those business owners that feels lonely in business because I know plenty of people that do it and plenty of people that don't do it as well, to remind me that I'm in quite a lucky position here.
And you also work so closely with your clients. You're always on the inside of a business. What have you learnt from them about scaling up a business, and what have you learnt not to do?
For me, it's hard because it's, all business models are different and how they do things. I think coming from a place of trust is a great position to have. Micromanaging isn't going to get a scaling business very far from what I've learnt. At the same time, I've always quite wary. We've had a period of fast growth at Upsource, and I don't want to grow that fast again in the next few years because I never want to sacrifice growth for the people who are managing that within the business. So that's what I guess I've seen sometimes from another business that I've been in and things is never, sacrifice your growth for the happiness of its people. I think I've not set up Upsource for that model of being just a financially driven business.
How do you know when you're growing too fast? What was the point where you felt that you needed to put the brakes on?
I think it's if it feels like a bit unmanageable and you're not keep proud of the output that you're giving other people, I guess, is that because things happen, things change, but I think if you need to readdress your time constantly and feel like you're not achieving how you want your business to be run, I think you can find that out quite easily, and you can see that it's, if you're proud of what you're achieving and what you're doing each day, you can have days where you're like, that was crazy, or what happened today, or this is a strange week. I've definitely had one of those recently. But no, when you get to a point you're like, no, all these things have happened, but I've also managed to do this, and that's then you're in a good position.
And what are your plans for growth? Where do you see Upsource going? What's your vision for the company?
Oh gosh. We've got plans, so we're definitely going to grow over the next 2 years. Look at definitely expanding our core services to other clients, which are traditional virtual assistant reports, inbox diary management. I can also see us expanding a little into providing HR support, more financial support, which we have started for some clients. With the AML registration and things. So definitely seeing what else we can do for them. And we've got one client right now, we're putting a really exciting structure in place for her business involving a chief of staff and a virtual assistant. So I'd love to see what other clients would benefit from that sort of support from us coming in and supporting with that.
So there are lots of opportunities for growth. What would you say are the biggest barriers at the moment? What's keeping you awake at night?
I'm quite fortunate that doesn't keep me awake. Maybe it's because I've got 2 little babies that keep me awake. I think there's only so much time I want to. I'd never want the business to sacrifice happiness of me or the team. So that is always the first and foremost. And if it got to a point and the growth wasn't being manageable, it's either, well, we've got to reevaluate the structure, bring someone else in place, employ, you never know, that might be an option at some point, or just put the brakes on the gears and be like, right, let's readdress who are our clients again, who do we want to support, and go back to the drawing board in that sense, not completely at the beginning. But no, I'm quite fortunate. I don't get kept awake by my business. Just the kids, yeah.
Caroline, it's been such a pleasure chatting to you. Best of luck with the business and thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
For more information, check out weareupsource.co.uk. You can also find Caroline on Instagram at weareupsource and on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed hearing Caroline's story, please share this episode with your friends. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next week for more sound advice, Entrepreneurs Unfiltered.